There are a lot of myths around ADHD, and these myths are doing a lot of harm. They're leading people to believe that they couldn't possibly have ADHD, and they're perpetuating the stigma around it, making life harder for everyone. Today, I want to address 10 common ADHD myths in the hopes that it helps someone. Or maybe you just want to send it to that one uncle of yours who doesn't believe in ADHD. Let's jump in. Number 1. Only boys have ADHD. For decades now, ADHD has primarily been diagnosed in young boys, and in fact, that is still happening today. But it isn't because ADHD only happens in boys. Girls can have ADHD just as much as boys. But because ADHD looks a little bit different in girls, it is often missed. Girls with ADHD tend not to have outward physical hyperactivity. This means they aren't being disruptive in class and are generally quieter. The result is that girls are underdiagnosed and often struggle all the way through adulthood, never knowing the reason is their ADHD. Number 2. All children grow out of ADHD. The truth is that somewhere around 20 to 50% of children who are diagnosed with ADHD seem to grow out of it, but that doesn't mean every child does. In fact, adult ADHD is quite common. But just like with girls, adults don't always have the hyperactivity, or we have better ways of coping with our hyperactivity, like taking up running. We also have all the pressures of being an adult, which we have to tackle. There's also a lot of behind-the-scenes suffering that those with ADHD rarely let others see. Number 3. People with ADHD just need to try harder. Telling someone with ADHD they just need to try harder is like telling someone in a wheelchair they just need to stand up and put one foot in front of the other. For many of us, it is impossible. No amount of trying harder will work. It's like being stuck in a box made of clear plastic. You can run into that invisible wall until the sun goes out, but you're never going to make it past that wall without some help. No amount of trying harder is going to work. Number 4. ADHD was created to sell medication. I remember hearing this for the first time when I was in elementary school. It was a classmate saying it to another classmate who had been diagnosed with ADHD and started medication. That was in the 1990s, and there are still people to this day who believe that ADHD isn't real. Many who say this do so because ADHD didn't exist when they were younger. Rather than believing that we humans are still learning new things about ourselves all the time, they instead believe that ADHD was suddenly invented, by the pharmaceutical industry, of course, because they want to sell more medications. This simply isn't true. Number 5. If you can play video games for hours, you don't have ADHD. As a gamer, this is a myth that I've always found particularly bothersome. It reduces something complex into a black and white scenario that simply isn't true. Yes, if you can play video games for hours, you can still have ADHD. Why? Well, ADHD is complicated, and it all begins with the subject. Sitting in class listening to the 5th teacher of the day talking about a subject you don't care about, it's a whole lot easier to get distracted by literally anything. But if it's a subject you're interested in, like maybe you love World War II history, or yes, video games, then you can easily sit calmly and pay attention for hours. Video games also have the added benefit of constantly offering different stimuli. Take a day in the farming simulator Stardew Valley as an example. When you first start the game, it's morning. You need to go out and water your plants and feed your animals. Then you might go to the mines, go to the beach to collect debris, or visit some of your friends in the village. Or you might do all 3. Each one of these activities gives you a new hit of dopamine, keeping you interested, having fun, and wanting more. Before you know it, you've played through an entire season in the game and forgotten to eat dinner, shower, or even go to the bathroom. And yes, I am speaking from personal experience. Number 6. ADHD is because of bad parenting. The idea that ADHD children are unruly is because of poor parenting is so incredibly harmful and flat out completely wrong. This is often said by the same people who say that ADHD didn't exist when they were younger. Some might even add that they would have had that kind of behavior beat out of them, as if this is how we should be treating children with ADHD now. Truth is, ADHD seems to be largely genetic. Chances are, if your child has ADHD, then one or possibly both of their parents do as well. And there's a chance that their children will have ADHD too. Number 7. ADHD is overdiagnosed. Because ADHD suddenly started being diagnosed, And turns out that a lot of people have ADHD. There was this idea that it's overdiagnosed. This often goes hand in hand with the myth that ADHD was created to sell medicine. It turns out that ADHD is just fairly common. Depending on whose numbers you're looking at, 2.5% to 5% of the world's population has ADHD, and those are only the ones that are diagnosed. That's about the same amount that identifies as LGBTQ+. It also turns out that in some groups, ADHD is massively underdiagnosed, meaning the number might actually be a whole lot higher. Number 8. ADD and ADHD are different things. If you got diagnosed before 2013, then you might have been given the diagnosis of ADD rather than ADHD, especially if you're female. But as of the release of DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is the gold standard for diagnosing mental disorders, ADD and ADHD are classified as the same thing, just called ADHD. ADD is considered an outdated and unused term. These sorts of changes are happening all the time, and the DSM gets updated about once every 10 years, but these changes take a while to filter down to everyone to become common knowledge. Number 9. You can't have ADHD, you aren't hyper. There are a few different things wrong with this myth. The first and most obvious is that not all hyperactivity is bouncing around on couches and running around screaming at the top of your lungs. It's that senior feeling when it's a beautiful day outside and you're stuck inside, only able to dream about being out there. It's daydreaming about being on vacation instead of listening to a monotone lecture about a subject you aren't interested in. But you also don't have to have hyperness to have ADHD. Today, ADHD is broken up into a few different types. The ADHD inattentive is what used to be called ADD. It's a form of ADHD that doesn't include any hyperactivity. Number 10. Caffeine makes your ADHD worse. A number of studies have been done that look at caffeine's impact on ADHD, and while results have been mixed, one thing that none of them have said is that caffeine makes your ADHD worse. Some studies have shown that caffeine can boost concentration in people with ADHD. Others have shown caffeine can make you more calm and focused, while others show that caffeine increases anxiety. How caffeine will impact a person varies from person to person, but there is some exploration into using caffeine to treat ADHD. But before you start chugging coffee, keep in mind that caffeine is addictive, and people with ADHD are more prone to addictions than a neurotypical person. And that's my last myth for this video. There are a ton of other myths around ADHD though, so I encourage you to do some research online. I know I'll do another myth video in the future, including one about autism, so keep an eye out for that. For now though, I'd like to invite you to come back again tomorrow for the next video in honor of ADHD Awareness Month. It won't be anything quite as heavy as this one, just a nice ADHD meme compilation. I hope you'll like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you again tomorrow.